Hi, I'm Dave Davidson. You may remember me from such videos as Why FIFA 20 Sucks and Why FIFA 21 Sucks. And it's that time of year again, folks, so strap yourselves in, smash the like and subscribe buttons, and make sure to turn off your ad blocker, cause daddy needs some sweet ad revenue, because it's time for the annual installment that's almost as shameless as the FIFA franchise itself. Why FIFA 22 Sucks, motherfuckers. If there was ever a video game that you'd like to be a sequel to avoid being a disappointment, it was FIFA 21. That game was an absolute train wreck, the worst FIFA game ever made, hands down, just down to how completely broken and terrible the match engine was. And yet FIFA 22 has still managed to be an utter letdown. Not that this should surprise anyone with the mental capacity of a chimpanzee, as EA has more or less specialized itself in rolling out constant disappointments for years. Alright, FIFA 21 was absolute garbage, but we still made millions of dollars from it, and now our mighty overlords, the shareholders, praise unto them, want us to make a new one. Any ideas? What if we basically add no new features to the game, make the match engine just as broken as last year, and then just keep monetizing the shit out of Ultimate Team? You're a genius. Now, if you haven't tuned into any of my self-loathing FIFA rants before, then I'll make it clear that this review is going to be more focused around the match engine and career mode, and will have basically nothing to do with EA's endless money printer that is FIFA Ultimate Team, because I refuse to play that, not only because career mode is more fun, but because playing it feels morally wrong. But with a match engine that's just as frustratingly bad as last year's, no worthwhile updates to career mode, and a distinct overall half-assedness about the entire game, there's very little to be satisfied about with FIFA 22. Firstly, I have to say, this game is a lot harder this year, at least when it comes to single player. Playing it on ultimate difficulty gave me a real run for my money, and the AI smashed me sometimes, and I gotta say, that's kind of refreshing. I cranked FIFA 21 up to ultimate straight away and whooped its ass. Or at least it would be refreshing if it had as much to do with the AI actually being better than previous years as it did the defending being absolutely atrocious. Defending in FIFA games has been dogshit for a long time, but in FIFA 22, defenders are positionally absolutely clueless. The game continues to be a goalfest, not as bad as FIFA 21 was, but still a lot worse than it should be. The back line is constantly all over the place, it's never in a straight line. One of your defenders always makes sure to keep every attacker on side while simultaneously refusing to mark anyone, just to ensure an attacker can get an easy tap in from the penalty spot. Fullbacks in particular are useless, they're all over the place, and the wings are always left wide open to exploit. Defenders just feel incredibly sluggish too, especially when pivoting and turning. It's like they're on ice skates constantly, and half the time if you do make a tackle, it'll just magnetize back to the attacker's feet. With how precise and well controlled attacking dribbling is, defenders have absolutely no hope most of the time, especially when you're playing a world-class side. What annoys me the most is that midfielders still refuse to come back and help you defend unless you manually drag them back. It just baffles me how involved even CDMs will be in attack and then just straight up refuse to help when you're under siege. I even went into the player instructions tab to specifically tell them to help, but lo and behold, there isn't even an option to be able to tell CMs or CDMs to come back in defense. You can tell a striker or a cam to do it, but not a defensive midfielder. EA, what the fuck is wrong with you? I suppose they're going under the assumption that midfielders will come back and help defend regardless, because, you know, that's their job and all, but that's also going under the assumption that EA can make a balanced match engine, and that's wildly speculative at best. It is so incredibly frustrating trying to defend well because it's more or less impossible, especially in the lower leagues and especially when you're playing against a bigger club. And what makes the game so difficult in the higher difficulties is that the AI has these defensive positioning issues much less, making them much harder to break down. That's not to say that they're good or anything, you can still score lots of goals against them at times and they still do dumb shit, but the AI clearly has a much better control over their backline than a player can ever have, and it makes defending such a daunting task, more of a punishing chore than a gameplay mechanic. But hey, the Ultimate Team cash cows will cry if they can't score 8 goals per match, and if they're not happy in spending all of their money, then EA shareholders aren't happy, and they're clearly still prioritizing making fat stacks of cash over a match engine that has any semblance of competent defending in it. A lot of the other parts of the match engine feel very similar to the previous few iterations, though I'd say that the game is overall a little bit slower, certainly than last year's game, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing, and certainly helps to make it less of a goal fest. EA hyped up the hypermotion technology as its big new feature, which I would have loved to be able to critique, except that they didn't port it to PC. It only got put on Xbox Series S, PS5, and fucking Stadia. I mean, putting aside the fact that average PC hardware is still far better than all three of those, and EA's argument regarding that is total bullshit, why is it on Stadia and not PC? Who the fuck uses Google Stadia? One big thing I noticed is that the difference between smaller and larger clubs is much bigger now. Clubs in a higher division than you are near impossible to beat on the higher difficulties, and even on legendary difficulty I found myself absolutely tearing the smaller Premier League clubs apart, even with a mid-table side like Arsenal. And then there's goalkeepers, who at first I thought looked pretty good. The animations look more natural and realistic, and they actually make low saves with their feet for the first time I can even remember seeing in a FIFA game, but that's just it. On a surface level, they look good, but once you play some more of the game, oh boy. Keeping with tradition, EA have once again found a way to make goalkeepers even more brain dead than in the previous version of the game. They still get easily beaten at the near post, they have terrible judgment in coming for the ball, and half of the time they dive out of the way, and I'm not even kidding. If the sacrifice for these new animations is that I might as well have a fucking toddler between the sticks, then it's not worth it. I never thought I'd miss the goalkeepers from FIFA 21, but god, I almost do. These ones are pathetically bad. As for career mode additions, there's pretty much nothing. Like, I don't want to cut this review short or anything because I want the ad rev and all, but EA aren't giving me much to work with here. Everything that was added in FIFA 21 is identical, as well as the post-match interviews and press conferences added in FIFA 20, and every mechanic that was already bare bones and needing attention has been completely ignored. When are you gonna update the morale mechanic, EA? Interviews are just so mind-numbingly pointless. They make Fallout 4 dialogue options look revolutionary. There are still just obviously choices that will increase your morale, and the one that pops up now and again that will obviously decrease it. It's literal baby gameplay. The training hub is still exactly the same, and I still really dislike that you can just sim at the highest attained level instead of just simming a random result. Again, the point of a training drill is to repeat a task so you can master it, not do it well once and then never have to do it again. EA are obviously just scared to make people play the game more than they have to. One rather strange change they made was to put kit selection behind the customization menu before a game rather than just prompting you to do it every time, perhaps in some weird attempt to save 2 or 3 seconds before starting up a match, which I wouldn't have such a big issue with if the game was capable of not picking a kit clash. And it's not just the custom kits that throw it off either, it does it for real teams too. Like, Jesus Christ, EA, if you're gonna make such an unnecessary change, at least be able to distinguish between colours. Didn't you learn the fucking colour wheel in primary school? The bootleg football manager match simming is identical, the youth academy system is identical, every half-baked career mode feature is exactly the same as it has been for years, except ooh, new animations for the contract negotiations. One area that did get a bit of a revamp is the player career mode, which now has an almost RPG-like sort of progression system where you gain new perks and stats by leveling up. Though it's marred by the training simming being overpowered, the game setting weird objectives like overall team possession when you play as a striker, and just in general still being inferior to manager mode. The only notable feature that's made its way into manager mode is the new create a club option, which at first I was very excited to see, being able to make my own custom club and even customize a stadium for it too. Not exactly a revolutionary mechanic, but a welcome one for sure. But I cannot understate how half-assed it is, particularly on an aesthetical level. You can make your own custom kits with its very basic kit editor, but they won't use the proper numbers from the league you're in, just the generic numbers that come with them. What I did find funny, however, is that it will still slap the league logo on the kit, and for a custom team in the A-League, it clips over the Adidas logo. If I were Adidas, I'd be suing EA's ass over that. Not to mention that in one of my creator club saves, the kits that the crowd were wearing didn't even match my jersey either. And don't get me started on the super generic badge editor, all you do is choose a color and a shape and then pick one from a drop-down menu. Really? No custom badge editor? Didn't they have that shit in like Euro 2008? I will admit I do like the Creator Club edition, but EA really half-assed it. But there's no reason to be surprised about that, is there? Ultimate Team continues to be the game mode that EA prioritizes, and other than all of the new cards that come with the seasonal update, it appears to be more or less the exact same avenue for making money off people with addictive personalities as it always has been. Volta mode has now ditched the story mode that nobody cares about for an online only design, and to give EA some semblance of credit, despite what it looks like they haven't monetized it. You have to earn Volta coins by playing and leveling up, but hey, give it some time. If it gets popular enough, they'll monetize the shit out of it. Graphically, the game remains basically unchanged apart from a few of the aforementioned animations that were added and a new game phase here or there, and despite there still being some flashy moments that come about when playing FIFA, there's always bound to be a few janky ones to go with them. And the game was far from bug-free either. Career mode saves were being rolled back unintentionally, and I personally had the game crash on me several times when loading into a match. Though I'd have to say that the most immersion-breaking bug in the game was being able to win silverware as Arsenal. And one more thing I will say about FIFA 22, and honestly pretty much any FIFA since 17 or 18, is that the soundtracks just aren't as good anymore. I know that's a bit of personal preference, but there will never be a FIFA soundtrack as good as FIFA 15 ever again. Stevie by Kasabian, Around Town by the Kooks, My Type by Saint Motel, just to name a few of the absolute bangers. Honestly, I can thank the FIFAs between like 10 and 17 for a lot of my taste in music, and although it has nothing to do with the core of the gameplay and a lot of it is just nostalgia for the earlier FIFA games, the soundtrack for the last few years has honestly been disappointing for me. And so we've come to the end of the video, and now it's time to ask the age-old question. Why the hell are people still buying this stupid ass game? And so comes the age-old answer. What other choice do we have for a football sim? FIFA has all of the market share and all of the licensing and... okay, never mind, it has most of the licensing. You're slipping, EA. Not to mention the fact that their only legitimate competitor is Konami and their new eFootball and... And before you tell me to just go play Football Manager, which you don't have to tell me to do, I freaking love Football Manager, it's a different sort of game. Sometimes you want to play something more casual that you can actually control and leave behind all of the extra complexities, but FIFA still poses a terrible option to do this. And yes, I know lots of people will want the latest squad updates and transfers, which is another factor that EA exploit every year when it comes to releasing the game annually, but if it wasn't clear already, I cannot recommend that anybody buys this game, football enthusiast or not. Although I wouldn't go as far as saying it's as bad as the disaster that is FIFA 21, it's still an absolute disaster nonetheless. Do not buy this game, do not give EA more money. Please EA, I'm not asking for much here. Let me have a genuine FIFA experience where defenders aren't totally useless. For the love of Christ, please change the league table UI back to how it was so I can see the whole thing at once, and let me have a custom Whooper badge. Not even for your shitty Ultimate Team, let me have it for Creator Club. But until EA begin to make any semblance of effort in making this franchise an enjoyable experience for fans, and not just an annual cash grab to keep their shareholders licking their lips at the prospect of pocketing millions, then I'd strongly suggest that you treat it like the virus that it is, and socially distance yourself from it at all times.